She woke up before the first hint of sunlight crept through the blinds, as she had done for the past several years. The room was still, almost too quiet, except for the soft, even breathing of her son sleeping beside her. She watched him for a long moment, his small chest rising and falling, his tiny hands curled into fists in his sleep. His face, untouched by the troubles of life, seemed to glow in the dim morning light. A bittersweet smile tugged at her lips. This little boy, her son, was the reason she continued, even when the world around her felt unbearably heavy. Just a few years ago, her life had been full of warmth and laughter. She had a husband who held her hand through every difficulty, a home filled with love, and dreams that painted the future in bright, vivid colors. They had often spoken of traveling, of building a life that seemed too perfect to be real. But the world, indifferent and cruel at times, had taken him away in an instant. A rain-soaked night, a careless driver, and suddenly she was holding nothing but grief in her arms, with a tiny boy who barely understood why his father wouldn't return. The first weeks were a blur of police reports, funeral arrangements, and people offering hollow words of comfort. "Stay strong," they said, as if those 3 words could stitch together the gaping hole in her heart. She remembered walking through her house after everyone had left, the walls echoing with a silence so profound it pressed against her chest. She could still see his favorite chair by the window, still hear the echo of his laughter bouncing off the walls. But he was gone, and the quiet that followed was deafening. Her son didn't cry for long, though he clung to her with tiny arms when the nights grew cold and lonely. His innocence gave her both solace and pain. Solace because he reminded her that life, however cruel, still had a pulse, and pain because she knew she was the only person keeping him from falling into the same darkness she sometimes felt surrounding her. She learned to cook quickly, to clean efficiently, to stretch every coin and every meal. She learned to smile, even when her eyes ached with exhaustion and sleepless nights. She found work at a small bakery just a few blocks from their apartment. It was modest, the pay barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but it offered her a routine, a way to survive. Every morning, she carried her son on her back in a faded cloth, humming softly as she kneaded dough, shaped loaves, and watched the yeast rise under the warm lights. Her co-workers noticed her diligence, her quiet strength, though none of them knew the full weight of the burden she carried. They often whispered about how she smiled through everything, how she had patience even when the ovens roared with heat, and the mornings arrived before dawn. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake while her son slept, counting coins at the kitchen table with a flickering lamp overhead, wondering if the money would stretch until the next payday. She often skipped meals, pretending she wasn't hungry, so that her son could eat well. Yet no matter how tired or broken she felt, she told him stories before bed. Stories of brave heroes, kind queens, and magical worlds where love always prevailed. She wanted him to believe that the world was still beautiful, even if she sometimes doubted it herself. Over time, the small apartment began to feel like a home again, not because it had changed, but because they had grown into it. She learned to laugh quietly with her son over silly drawings he made, over the simple pleasure of a warm slice of bread from the bakery. She began to notice little signs of hope. A neighbor bringing extra vegetables, a co-worker offering a ride home on a rainy day, the first time her son tied his own shoelaces. These moments, small and seemingly insignificant, became the threads that mended her broken heart, slowly weaving resilience back into her life. One evening, after another long day at the bakery, she returned home to find her son waiting by the door, holding a crumpled piece of paper. He handed it to her with a shy smile. It was a drawing, a simple sketch of the 2 of them standing under a bright yellow sun. On top, in shaky handwriting, he had written, "My mom is my hero." Her chest tightened. Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back, kneeling to wrap her arms around him. She whispered into his hair, "You're the reason I never gave up." That night, for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel proud. Proud of her small victories, proud of her son's unwavering love, proud that they had survived. The years rolled on. Her son grew taller, stronger, and wiser. He began to understand in fragments the sacrifices she had made for him. He noticed the calluses on her hands from long hours at the bakery, the worn soles of her shoes, the way she sometimes paused mid-step, exhausted from carrying so much responsibility alone. And yet, he also noticed her smiles, her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled when he achieved even the smallest victories. One morning, years later, she watched him prepare for his first day at high school. He adjusted his backpack with a nervous grin, and she tucked a stray lock of hair behind his ear. He turned, giving her a quick hug before running off to catch the bus. She stood at the doorway, hands trembling slightly, a bittersweet ache in her chest. Time was moving too quickly, but in that moment, she realized that all her struggles, all her pain, all the sleepless nights had led to this. A young boy stepping into the world with courage and hope. Even in the quiet, lonely moments, she never allowed herself to stop believing. She continued to work at the bakery, greeting every customer with warmth, carrying her son to school whenever he needed it, and telling him stories that fed his imagination and his heart. Life was still hard, sometimes unbearably so, but the small victories, the fleeting moments of joy, and the unwavering love between her and her son kept her moving forward. The years moved quietly but relentlessly, carrying her son from a curious, small child to a boy brimming with questions about the world. School mornings became a whirlwind of rushing breakfast, tying shoes, and hurried hugs, but each moment was a thread weaving their lives tighter together. She noticed how he began to observe the world with a keen eye. The way he noticed someone's sadness, the way he offered to share his lunch with a friend who had none, the way he asked questions about life that sometimes made her pause and wonder if he understood more than she thought. The bakery had become more than just a place of work. It was a refuge. The warmth of the ovens, the scent of rising bread, and the quiet camaraderie of co-workers reminded her that life, even in hardship, could hold moments of peace. She became known not just as the woman who baked bread, but as someone who listened, someone who helped, someone who carried a quiet strength that inspired those around her. Customers often lingered, chatting about small things, the weather, the day's bread, the occasional joke, oblivious to the struggles she bore outside the shop's warm walls. Her son began to excel in school. Teachers noted his kindness, his curiosity, and his diligence. She watched with a swelling heart as he tackled homework, sports, and friendships with determination. But with pride came fear. She worried about the world he would step into, the world that had already taken so much from her. Nights became restless again, though this time not from hunger or immediate worry, but from the fear that she couldn't shield him from all the heartbreak life might bring. One autumn evening, the first leaves turning gold outside their small apartment window, her son came to her clutching a worn notebook. "Mom," he said softly, "I've been writing stories. Can I read one to you?" She nodded, her hands trembling slightly as he opened the notebook. The words tumbled out, full of imagination and wonder, and she realized that in the midst of their struggles, he had developed a voice that was uniquely his own. Tears welled in her eyes as she listened, thinking of all the nights she had spent weaving stories to lull him to sleep, and now he was crafting his own. It was a quiet triumph, a testament to the resilience they had both nurtured together. Time pressed forward, and soon her son was entering his teenage years. He faced the world with a mix of vulnerability and courage, and she marveled at the person he was becoming. But adolescence brought new challenges, social pressures, disappointments, moments of self-doubt. She watched him stumble, sometimes fall, and she felt every pain with him. Yet she never intervened too forcefully. Instead, she offered guidance, love, and the unwavering presence that had become her most precious gift. Her own life was not without its hardships. The bakery struggled at times, bills piled up, and the city outside their small apartment could feel cold and indifferent. There were days when she felt the weight of it all pressing down, threatening to suffocate her resolve. Yet every evening, when she returned home to her son, she reminded herself why she persisted. He was her reason, her anchor, her heart walking outside her body. One winter, when the city streets were lined with ice and snow, her son came home from school looking more serious than usual. He held a letter in his hands, and she knew immediately it was from the high school principal. Her heart clenched. He opened it slowly, eyes wide, and read aloud. He had been selected for a special scholarship program that would allow him to study in another city, a program only a few students ever achieved. Joy and fear collided inside her. She was proud beyond words, but the thought of her son leaving, even for an opportunity he deserved, brought a pang she could not ignore. That night, she sat beside him, hands intertwined, heart pounding. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "This is your chance to shine. Always remember where you come from, and carry our love with you wherever you go." He hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that held years of unspoken words, of love, of gratitude. "I'll make you proud, Mom," he said, voice trembling. She nodded, knowing that pride would not erase the emptiness she would feel in the coming months when he left for the program. The day he left, she woke before dawn to see him off. The streets were still, the sky a pale gray, and she held back her tears as they hugged one last time at the bus station. "Be brave," she whispered. "And never forget, I'm always with you." The months that followed were quiet. She continued her routine at the bakery, but the apartment felt emptier without his laughter echoing through the rooms. She poured herself into work, into small acts of kindness for neighbors and co-workers, and into the memories she carried of him. Each phone call, each letter he sent, was a lifeline, a reminder that even when apart, their bond remained unbroken. In the evenings, she often sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker and the people passing by. She reflected on their journey, the nights of despair, the mornings of hope, the countless sacrifices made silently, and the victories both large and small. And though the ache of loneliness sometimes pressed against her heart, it was tempered by a deep, abiding pride in the young man her son was becoming. Her story, she realized, was not just about hardship. It was about endurance, love, and the quiet courage that defines the human spirit. Every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night had carved a path to moments like these. Bittersweet, yes, but also beautiful. One evening, years later, her son returned home for the holidays, now taller, more confident, carrying the air of someone who had faced the world and come out stronger. He embraced her tightly, and she felt the familiar mix of joy and ache swell inside her chest. "Mom," he said softly, "I've learned so much, but I'll never forget you. Everything you did, it made me who I am." And in that embrace, she understood fully. The sacrifices, the pain, the nights spent worrying and hoping, had all led to this. She had given him not just life, but strength, courage, and love. The things no hardship could ever take away. The years passed with a rhythm all their own, carrying her son from adolescence into young adulthood. He returned home from college for brief breaks, bringing stories of new friends, late-night study sessions, and the excitement of discovering the world beyond their small apartment. She listened with rapt attention, her heart swelling with pride even as she worried about the dangers and disappointments that might lie ahead. Every time he stepped out into the city streets on his own, she held her breath for a moment, silently willing him safety, willing the world to treat him kindly. Work at the bakery became both comfort and routine. She still rose before dawn, kneading dough, shaping loaves, and filling the air with the scent of warmth and home. Customers often commented on her gentle smile, her patience, the calm presence she carried despite the invisible weight she bore. She had become a quiet force in the neighborhood, someone people relied on not just for bread, but for understanding, for kindness, for a listening ear. And yet, inside, she carried a longing she could not shake. The yearning to see her son fully happy, to know that all her sacrifices had brought him real joy. One evening, during one of her son's visits home, he arrived with a letter in hand and eyes sparkling with nervous excitement. He had been accepted for an internship in a distant city, an opportunity that could open doors for his future. She smiled at him, proud beyond words, but beneath her calm exterior, her heart wavered. The thought of him leaving again, of facing challenges without her close by, made her chest ache. "We always knew this day would come," she said softly, wrapping her arms around him. "You've worked so hard and you deserve this. Just remember, wherever you go, my love goes with you." He nodded, understanding her unspoken fear, and hugged her tightly. She held him longer than usual, imprinting the warmth of that moment into her memory. That night, she stayed awake longer than normal, thinking about how fast time had flown, about how the little boy she once carried on her back was now a young man stepping boldly into the world. The next months were a mixture of pride and emptiness. She continued her work at the bakery, keeping her hands busy to quiet her restless mind. She thought often of her late husband, the man who had been taken too soon, and the son they had built together from love and loss. Life had shown her both cruelty and mercy, pain and joy, and she had learned to accept the bittersweet nature of it all. Her son returned home briefly for the holidays, full of stories of city life, friends, and experiences. She listened with delight, noticing how his eyes sparkled with ambition and hope. Yet she also noticed the small changes, the way he sometimes carried a quiet burden, the weight of responsibility, the moments when he looked lost and overwhelmed. She knew life was teaching him lessons she could no longer shield him from, and she hoped he would meet each challenge with the courage she had seen bloom in him since childhood. One evening, while preparing dinner together, he paused, looking at her with an intensity she hadn't seen in years. "Mom," he said, voice low and serious, "I want to thank you for everything. I wouldn't be here without you. I know it hasn't been easy, but you never gave up on me." Her hands trembled, tears welling in her eyes. She had long hidden the depth of her struggles behind smiles, behind stories, behind the warmth of the bakery. Yet in this moment, her son saw her fully, her love, her sacrifices, her unspoken pain. She hugged him, pressing her face to his chest, whispering, "You've made every hardship worth it." Months later, the inevitable day arrived. Her son had secured a permanent position in the city, a role that promised growth and opportunity. She watched him pack his belongings, his excitement mingled with a palpable tension. The apartment, once a haven of shared memories and quiet triumphs, felt empty even before he left. The bus station was cold, the sky gray, and she held back tears as they hugged one last time. "Be brave," she whispered. "Face the world with courage and never forget that I'm always with you." He nodded, tears brimming, and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mom." When he left, the apartment seemed smaller, quieter, lonelier. She continued her daily routines, baking bread, interacting with neighbors and co-workers, but a deep ache lingered in her heart. She realized that her journey was not just about survival, but about letting go, about trusting that the strength and love she had instilled in her son would carry him forward, even when she was not there to protect him. Time continued its relentless march. She celebrated small victories from afar. His promotions, achievements, moments of happiness, each one a testament to their shared resilience. But with every success came a pang of longing, a reminder of the spaces in her life that remained empty, the quiet nights that reminded her of what she had lost and what she had given. Evenings became reflective, filled with memories of the past, the laughter of a small boy running through their apartment, the smell of fresh bread in the bakery, the warmth of hugs that had once been constant and reassuring. She would sit by the window, watching the city lights flicker, thinking about how far they had come together. And though a sense of pride warmed her heart, the loneliness pressed against her, soft but persistent. It was during these quiet moments that she truly understood the nature of love and sacrifice. Life had given her both joy and sorrow, and in the blending of the two, she found a bittersweet peace. Her son had grown into a remarkable young man, full of potential and hope, and she had done her part in shaping him. Yet the journey had come at a cost. Nights spent in solitude, meals skipped, and dreams deferred. She allowed herself to feel every emotion, grief, pride, longing, and love, because each was a reflection of the life she had lived and the bond she had nurtured. And though her heart bore scars that would never fully fade, it was also full of the quiet, enduring love that had guided her through every hardship, every loss, and every triumph. In the end, she realized that life's beauty often lies in its contradictions. In joy interwoven with sorrow, in victories tempered by loss, and in love that persists even when circumstances make it painful. She had given her son the greatest gift she could, a foundation of resilience, courage, and unwavering love, even if the world required them both to walk separate paths for a time. The years continued their quiet, relentless flow. Her son had settled into his new life, carving out a path for himself in the city that once seemed so vast and intimidating. He was flourishing, respected at work, making friends, and slowly discovering the contours of the adult world. Yet, despite his accomplishments, he never forgot her. Letters, phone calls, and occasional visits home were lifelines, reminders that no matter how far life carried him, he remained tethered to the woman who had given him everything. She continued her work at the bakery, the rhythm of her days unchanged, though her heart often felt heavier in his absence. Neighbors and co-workers noticed a quiet solemnity beneath her usual gentle smile, as if she carried a lifetime of memories in her gaze. Yet she refused to let despair dominate her life. She baked bread with care, listened to the troubles of those around her, and found solace in the simple joy of helping others. Evenings were spent with quiet reflection, remembering the years of struggle and triumph, and thinking about the future her son was building. One spring afternoon, she received a call that shook her to the core. Her son had been in a minor accident, a car collision that left him with bruises and a fractured arm. The panic she had buried deep within her for years surged to the surface. She dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, heart hammering, voice trembling as she navigated the bustling city streets. When she saw him, sitting on the hospital bed with his arm in a sling but a brave smile on his face, relief and tears collided within her. "I'm okay, Mom," he said softly, trying to reassure her even as she held his hand tightly. "It's nothing serious." She pressed her forehead to his shoulder, letting her tears fall freely. I can't even imagine losing you," she whispered, voice cracking. "You're my heart, my everything." The incident left her shaken for days, but it also reinforced a truth she had long known. Life could change in an instant, and every moment with the ones we love is precious. She doubled her efforts to stay connected with her son, offering advice, encouragement, and support as he navigated challenges at work, relationships, and the pressures of adulthood. She realized that her role had shifted from caregiver to guide, from protector to mentor, but her love remained steadfast and unyielding. Months passed, and life resumed a fragile normalcy. Her son continued to thrive, and she found comfort in small routines. Visiting the bakery each morning, greeting neighbors, tending to her plants on the windowsill, and writing letters to friends and family. She had learned to find joy in quiet moments, to savor small victories, and to hold on to hope even when the future remained uncertain. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, her son returned home for a short visit. He had news, a promotion at work, a project he had been striving for, recognition for his dedication. She listened with pride swelling in her chest, but beneath her joy was a subtle ache. She realized that the moments of closeness were fleeting, that life was moving him further into a world she could not always touch. That night, they sat together in the living room, drinking tea and talking quietly. "Mom," he said, voice soft, "I sometimes think about everything you went through for me. I don't know how you did it all." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "I didn't do it alone. You gave me the strength to keep going. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every worry, it was all for you. You made it worth it." He reached out and held her hands, a simple gesture that conveyed more than words ever could. In that moment, she felt a profound connection, one that had endured every hardship, every distance, every challenge. She realized that love, quiet, unyielding, and steadfast, had the power to survive even when the world seemed determined to pull it apart. But life, as she had learned, was rarely without its hardships. A few months later, her health began to decline subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Tiredness lingered longer, aches became more persistent, and occasional dizzy spells reminded her of the fragility she had long ignored. She brushed it off, unwilling to burden her son, unwilling to acknowledge that her body was beginning to betray her in small, insistent ways. Her son noticed, of course. In quiet moments, he would ask if she was feeling well, watch her carefully, and insist she see a doctor. She would smile and wave him off, claiming she was fine, but deep down she knew she could not hide the truth forever. The same woman who had given everything to ensure his safety and happiness now faced her own vulnerabilities alone, with only the memories of love and resilience to sustain her. Despite the subtle decline in her health, she continued her routines, finding purpose in each day. She baked bread for neighbors, smiled at customers, and wrote letters and small notes for her son to find when she was not around. She wanted him to always feel her presence, to know that even if circumstances separated them physically, her love remained eternal. One crisp autumn morning, her son called from the city, his voice tinged with excitement. He had achieved another milestone at work, a recognition he had long aspired to. She listened, pride and longing mixing in her chest, knowing that every moment of struggle and sacrifice had contributed to this achievement. Yet as she hung up the phone, she paused, hand on her chest, feeling the subtle, insistent fatigue that had been growing over months. She closed her eyes and let herself remember all the years. The laughter, the tears, the sleepless nights, the victories, the small quiet joys, and she felt a bittersweet ache, a mixture of pride and the realization that time was moving relentlessly forward. In the quiet of the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat by the window, gazing out at the city lights, feeling both the weight of her solitude and the enduring warmth of her son's love. She understood that life was fleeting, that every moment held both joy and sorrow, and that love, once given fully, could withstand the passage of time and distance. And in that moment, she felt at peace, not complete, not unbroken, but profoundly aware of the beauty and fragility of a life lived fully, fiercely, and with an unwavering heart. Time had settled into a quiet rhythm, each day a delicate balance of routines, memories, and small joys. Her son had grown into a remarkable man, confident, compassionate, and wise beyond his years. He called often, visited when he could, and shared with her the milestones of his adult life, promotions, friendships, and the small victories that made life meaningful. Each achievement brought her immense pride, but also a quiet ache, a reminder that the passage of time spared no one, and that life was fragile and fleeting. Her health, however, continued its subtle decline. Fatigue lingered, strength waned, and occasional dizzy spells reminded her that her body was no longer as resilient as her spirit. She brushed off concerns, insisting she was fine, even as the loneliness of the apartment and the absence of her son's constant presence grew heavier. Yet through it all, she continued to bake, to smile at neighbors, to write letters tucked into books her son would find when he returned, ensuring that her love and guidance were ever present, even from afar. One winter evening, her son returned home, bringing warmth, laughter, and stories from the city. She welcomed him with open arms, heart swelling with both pride and longing. They spent hours talking, sharing meals, and revisiting memories of his childhood. The little victories, the long nights of studying, the times they had laughed through hardship. She noticed how much he had grown, how much he had learned, and how he carried with him the strength and resilience she had nurtured all those years. That night, as they sat by the window watching snowflakes drift softly from the sky, he turned to her with a seriousness that made her heart tighten. "Mom," he said, voice trembling slightly, "I've realized how much you've given me, everything. I can never repay it, but I hope you know how deeply I love you, how grateful I am for every sacrifice, every night you stayed awake for me, every story you told me, every meal you made me." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out, taking his hands in hers. "You've made every hardship worth it," she whispered. "You are the reason I endured, the reason I smiled through the pain. You are my heart outside of me, and seeing the person you've become fills me with more pride than words could ever express." Days passed, filled with quiet routines and moments of shared joy. But one morning, she awoke feeling unusually weak. The fatigue that had been creeping through her body now pressed heavily on her chest. She tried to rise, tried to carry on as always, but her body refused. She realized, with a calm clarity, that her journey was approaching its final chapter. She called her son, and he rushed home, worry etched across his face. Seeing her frail but still determined to smile, he knelt beside her, holding her hand tightly. "Mom, please don't leave me," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. She looked at him, eyes soft and full of love. "I'm not leaving you, my darling. I'm with you in every breath, every memory, every story, every act of love we've shared. You are strong because of what we've built together. I am proud beyond words, and I love you more than life itself." In those final days, they sat together often, reliving memories, telling stories, and laughing quietly at small, familiar moments. She watched him grow into the man she had always hoped he would be, confident, kind, and resilient. She reminded him of lessons learned, of values held dear, of the strength of love and the importance of perseverance. One peaceful evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose, she held her son close for the last time. Her breath was shallow, but her eyes were bright with love. "Promise me," she whispered. That you will live fully, love deeply, and never forget where you come from. I promise, Mom, he said, clutching her hands, tears falling freely. I'll carry you with me always. She smiled faintly, feeling a deep, bittersweet peace. The journey of hardship, sacrifice, and endless love had come full circle. She had lived for her son, nurtured him, and guided him with a heart unbroken even in the face of unimaginable pain. And now, as her final moments approached, she knew her love would endure beyond time and distance. Her son held her as she slipped quietly from the world, a soft exhale marking the end of a life filled with courage, resilience, and unconditional love. The room felt heavy with sorrow, yet also filled with the warmth of a bond that could never be severed. He stayed with her through the night, speaking softly, recounting memories, and feeling the echo of her love in every corner of the room. In the weeks and months that followed, he carried forward the lessons she had instilled: the strength to face adversity, the courage to love deeply, and the wisdom to persevere. He shared her stories with his own children, her legacy alive in every smile, every act of kindness, every embrace. And though the ache of loss remained, it was tempered by the enduring power of a mother's love, a love that had shaped him, guided him, and would remain with him forever. Life, she had shown, was a tapestry of joy and sorrow, hope and despair, love and loss. And in the story of her life, the quiet, unwavering love that had carried her son through every hardship became the most profound, beautiful truth of all. A heart that endured, even when broken, and a legacy of love that time itself could not erase.